Welcome to a new video of the running of my Mk1 MX5, and this video specifically around what's been happening in the last 6 months of ownership. So to do that, I think let's take you to drive and I'll tell you everything that's been happening. Well, it's fair to say that when you first sit in a Mk1 MX5, they're quite small, snug cars. There's not a great deal of room. The steering wheel is a little on the big side. It's a little bit low. You prefer it a little bit higher, a little bit closer to you. There's not much elbow room. Certainly the right hand side of my elbows on the door, you'll be rubbing elbows with any passenger in the passenger seat. And I've got the seat fully back and fully tilted with a little gap to the behind the seat, and for the little bit of hair I've got on my head, it's just about touching the roof, and I'm 6 foot 15 stone sort of guy, so it's a little bit snug. However, the pedals are where I expect them, the gear stick is a joy, and let's take it for a quick drive. And let me tell you everything that's been happening with the car over the past 6 months or so. And I think just as we're about to leave, is one of the interesting things with the MX5 is that we never really planned on running the 4th modern classic, and we'd had the SL500 first, then we bought the Audi TT and the Porsche Boxster S. This was a bit of an impulse buy, and it was really because my wife and I had owned MX5 Mk1s before. We wanted to come back to it because although we said we were trying to use the other 3 cars more frequently, in the bad weather, the long winter months, we felt that we weren't going to use them as much as we probably should have done. So we bought the MX5. Cosmetically, not the best MX5, but it was really about rust-free example, or as close to rust-free as you can get a Mk1 MX5, and mechanically sound. And because the plan with this little car is we're going to use this 12 months of the year. So come wind, rain or sunshine, this car is going to be used for all sorts of jobs, from supermarket to taking children to different places to commuting and everything in between. Right, let's go and let me tell you what's been happening over the last 6 months. Some of you may recall that back in October, November, December time last year, I had an intermittent problem with this little MX5. The engine would just cut and die on me after sort of 10, 15, 20 minutes of driving. And I thought it was an ignition problem, so I ended up changing the plugs, HT leads, coil pack, temp sensor, mass airflow sensor. And it resulted in Christmas Eve of all days, having just replaced another component to break down in a nearby village, and I had to abandon it for the Christmas period in this village. And then early in the new year I decided to stop throwing parts at this and use a bit of engineering knowledge and experience, and took it to an MX5 specialist up in the Midlands, who fortunately managed to diagnose it as a faulty fuel pump. And in their 25 years of combined MX5 experience, they'd never, I think it was the second fuel pump they'd ever known to fail. So I got that replaced in January, and the car's worked great ever since. The highlight for me was in the really bad wet weather of January and February, where we seemed to be in floods continuously. This little car was on the way back from work. There'd been heavy weather warnings out for floods, and it was dark, and it's about a 30 mile commute for me. And this car was absolutely great, went through flood water, it was in the dark, and everything I asked of it, it did. And actually, it's been utterly reliable. I think most of you are aware that I like to keep all my cars standard and OEM spec, either left the factory. But I think for the MX5, as we're using it as a bit of a different car, I'm going to probably change that. One thing I have noticed over the last 6 months is that the ride's a little bit bouncy. So much so that I'm continuously banging my head with the roof up, which, because it's an all-round car, I tend to do quite a lot. So the plan is to probably fit some coilovers, I think, to the car, and hopefully that'll improve the ride quality. The thing I love most about the MX5 is because of the low power output, because of the low weight, you can really push the MX5 hard on the road and stay well within the safety of the speed limits and keep your license safe. And I noticed that more so than ever now when I compare it to the Porsche, Mercedes and Audi that are sat back in the garage, where they get into license losing speeds so quickly. And I think for me, that's part of the fun of owning an MX5. It's a real joy because you can push the car. And I do fear in the future that where the car industry is going with regard to electrification of cars, engines becoming smaller but turbocharged, the way they've got to look now for legislation and pedestrian impact damage. And I just think that cars like the Mark 1 MX5, they'll never be made again. These are a dying breed of car, and I think it's sad. I think it's a sad, disappointing future, and I think there becomes a responsibility now of owners of current Mark 1s to do what we can to keep the rust and corrosion away from these cars, keep them mechanically sound, and let future generations experience what we've been experiencing over the last 25-30 years. Hope you've enjoyed the video. If you do, please give me the thumbs up, please subscribe, and there'll be another video coming out soon.